What's good with YouTube? Y'all already know. Big Flacco from ACP, a convict's perspective. Hoping everybody's having a productive week. Before we get to this video though, please hit the like, subscribe, comment, do all those things to help support your boy. And hit that bell notification for future fire content. So as you can tell by the title and thumbnail, we're going to be talking about the Cacuys, the Goon Squad, IGI. These are the individuals that we used to refer to as far as in prison, who were part of basically a special unit in every institution. They were called the Investigational Service Unit. For most of us trying to do our day-to-day activities in prison politics, they were our worst nightmare. Now, why were they our worst nightmare? Because this was a unit that was responsible for so many different facets that affected security in an institution. One being that you had the gang coordinators were part of this investigative service unit. You had those that did the investigations on DA referrals, submitted reports to the courts and whatnot. And they were really small, and they kind of operated kind of secretly, right? You know, their highest ranking officer in this department used to be a lieutenant. It didn't go any higher than that. And that lieutenant, right, he only reported to the warden, believe it or not. Or maybe the associate warden, right? But mainly the warden. All open-ended investigations on every yard, didn't matter how many yards were at that institution, stopped at the ISU lieutenant's desk. And from there it went on up to the warden. Now, they had a different type of uniform as opposed to regular correctional officers. Back in the day, correctional officers used to have, like the red or green unit, right? And then they'd have the, the patch California and whatnot, right? Now, their patch would be black for some reason. And see, the gang coordinators, right, or investigators, right, that were part of this unit, they were like the one unit that would be in contact with different IGIs in different prisons and stuff like that, and different classification officers in different county jails, as well as with SSU officers that were out there on the streets. Now, if anybody doesn't know what SSU was, that was Special Service Unit. They were like gang investigators or investigators for the State Department of Corrections that was out there in the streets. And they could be in any county from San Diego all the way up to Humboldt County. They were everywhere. And sometimes they operated in like multi-jurisdiction. Now, IGI, right, which was Institutional Gang Investigators, they were the main ones that put together your validation packet if you were suspected prison gang member or prison gang associate. But all those, the Goon Squad, all the ISU officers, they all worked together to pretty much combat prison gangs and whatnot, right? But they would put together that packet, send it to the ISU lieutenant who would sign off on it, and then they would send that packet to Sacramento, and Sacramento would have a special individual that would sit there and either validate your packet or not. And at that point, you would be validated in the state as a prison gang member. Now, that's why they were the worst, worst nightmare. Because you know what? They used to use a lot of tactics. They would lie. They would take information and spin the narrative. They would do anything to get you validated. They would take, pictures. Say you were in the county jail and you were celled up with someone that was validated, and you hadn't even been to prison yet. They would use that as an association and as a point against you. So they had a really unfair system, and they knew what they were doing. They would try to sneak into the pods at different hours, right, trying to do searches, and that's when you would hear the homies say, "Cacuy's in the building, Cacuy's in the building." You would shut down all activities and secure whatever you had in your cell. Anytime that we knew that IGI was in the building, we would stop doing any type of household business and we would secure ourselves. It would be very common that we would have all our activities on freeze based upon the fact that IGI was being seen at numerous locations doing cell searches. We would just take all precautions because IGI was not one to play with. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the IGI sergeant would be the one that would typically sit in on all ICC meetings, and he would be the one that would pretty much try to get everybody to debrief. Every time you went to an ICC meeting and you were a prison gang validated member, at the end of your ICC hearing, they would say, "Hey, you want to debrief?" Everyone, man. And that was usually the IGI sergeant or ISU sergeant, because he was usually the one that would be conducting the debriefing process, along with other low-ranking members. That's where that whole model of in Pelican Bay, in Pelican Bay, you go there to either die, parole, or debrief. You know what I'm saying? There's not many options that you have there. Once you're there, you're stuck. I would get people to, flip and, manipulate them to debrief and whatnot. And they would always tell people that, oh, if you debrief, it can't be used in any criminal proceedings. But basically, they would have all kinds of information, and it could help lead them into other investigations and a whole lot of stuff. Like I said, man, people sometimes talk on here, hey, everything you're saying, law enforcement is having a field day. IGI has more information than most of us that have fucking podcasts and talk about prison gangs. I tell you that right now. They know a whole lot. And the Goon Squad, as we call them, right? They were also known for fucking covering up a lot of shit. They were also known for showing a lot of favoritism. They were also known for setting people up that they had issues with, or they felt weren't cooperating, or they felt made a wrong decision. If they felt someone pretty much got a slap on the wrist over something that they called, or they couldn't convict them, they were going to find a way to retaliate against you. Sometimes, get on rooftops and basically film when we were doing our machina, or even try to film when we were in our Kleta groups and just try to, identify certain members or who was in charge. And, they did all that same stuff that we did. The psychoanalysis, character analysis, and just reading body language and looking for patterns and routines. They did the same shit. And back then, Norteños, we were not allowed to lock it up when IGI would come. We'd tell them, no, go fuck themselves or whatever, right? So they started getting slick. They would start coming like on a visiting day or a legal law, and they would send regular officers to come get you when you were in the hole. And next thing you know, when you hit that corner and you're on the hallway somewhere or whatnot, you're going a whole different direction. You don't even know where you're going. Next thing you know, you're in the IGI office. They were sneaky like that. And that's when they would try to pry for information. Of course, nobody would ever talk to them, but they would take pictures of your tattoos and all kinds of stuff, And the more you were reluctant to even talk to them, the more they had a hard on to make sure you got validated. And all they needed was 3 things to validate you as a prison gang member or associate. That's why there was a period when homeboys weren't allowed to get Wetega birds, XIVs, X4, any of those type of tattoos, because they're using that to validate homies. Now, when they entered the building, it was every soldado's responsibility to yell Cacuy in the building, because you wanted to make sure that every soldado knew that they were about to hit somebody's cell. You didn't know if that was going to be a homeboys, friend, foe, or whoever it was going to be, right? But you weren't going to assist, the IGI, letting them just come walk into the household without it being acknowledged that they were there. Household activities would not, presume until you got a Cacuy clear. You'd have to check every tier, every pod to make sure that they were no longer there. Now, every ISU division at each prison was always a little bit different. Depending on what was going on. Like, say if there was a lot more like murders and like hits that were going down, and drugs, they would focus on that. Okay, if the Northerners were the ones that were coming into that prison causing a ruckus, they would start finding ways to validate, Northerners as Northern structure. Then you just had moments where just however they felt that day, that's what they were going to do. Like a lot of homeboys back in the days were getting validated in places like Jamestown and Pleasant Valley for some reason. That was a place where they were just wrapping homeboys up. The worst thing about the Goon Squad, IGI Cacuys, was that if they wanted you mad, they were going to find a reason to get you, man. I've seen it time and time again, right, where, just a little bit of them taking as disrespect from an individual. Next thing you know, he's looking at a long shoe term or indeterminate shoe, or he's being validated as something he's never even heard of, right? This happened all the time with other groups. It seemed like everywhere I was at, it seemed like the Norteños were always the ones that they focused on validating first. Now, I do remember in 1999, when they started validating all the NLRs, they were coming down fucking heavy on those cats. Every institution, they were pulling them off the yards, taking their pictures, searching the cells randomly. They were trying to make sure that their validation stuck. And they found just even them talking to each other on the tiers in some places because they didn't have enough information to validate them, right? They would use that, communicate with another NLR member. So it was a trip how when they have a fucking bone to pick, how hard they'll go after a group. When the MS started talking Nawa and the NF started talking Nawa, they started studying Nawa, right? When the BGF was talking Swahili, they started learning how to speak with Swahili. Same thing with all the languages that the whites spoke, right? They started to learn, so, they started to be able to break certain codes and whatnot, how to check mail and how to look for ghostwriting. And, IGI would stay on top of their game, man. So all the groups would forever be changing the way they had to do things because IGI was right there on your tail at all times. And for them, this was their job. I mean, they got to use all kinds of overtime, right? Work all kinds of hours, and they got to do what they love, man. It was like a game for them, man. Let's go after these gang members. Let's see what we can find out. Let's see what kind of cases we could build. They wanted to be part of every aspect of it because they felt that as being part of the ISU unit, that every gang at every institution was part of their business. That's where like the terms like, Cacuy, like they were your monster. They're the ones that you were like, you had nightmares about, The Goon Squad, they were some goons, man. They came in, they were fucking no joke, man. Anybody that was usually an IG officer wasn't usually somebody that was weak, man. Every once in a while you see one, you'd be like, man, how the hell did he become IGI, man? But for the most part, they were just a certain breed. See the difference between them and other officers? They was out to get you. Most other officers just wanted to do their fucking 9 to 5 and go home. That said, it's your boy Flacco, ACP. I'm gone.